Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Minnesota Matchbox Makeovers. Yeah, I know you're probably wondering, what the hell is he up to? Well, we all found out yesterday that Sir Marty has gone on walkabout for 10 days. Okay, maybe it's more like drive about and fly about, and certainly, Marty's no Crocodile Dundee, but he is Matchbox Marty. So I figured everybody'd miss him, and somebody better do some doggone Matchbox restorations while he's gone, and keep all you people who love restorations satiated. So anyway, this is the 31C Lincoln Continental, modeled after that early 60s Lincoln version that JFK was riding in when he got shot, and that mobsters loved because the suicide doors made it easy to push people out of the moving car. Anyway, I'm going to restore this one and take another swipe at that Matchbox metallic paint, so stick around. So let's start this whole deal with a story. As you can see, the casting, of course, was held together with two posts. One of them went into that really shallow trunk. It was a really good casting, though. But anyway, here's the story. So the Continental, the birth of the Continental, it was produced as a prototype personal car for Edsel Ford, the CEO or president at the time of the Ford Motor Company. And this was in 1939. And when they shipped it to him, he was in Florida. And all of his big fat cat pals down there really liked the car, so he sent a telegram back to Michigan where they made it saying, "I can sell 1,000 of these." And hence it was born. You pop this baby apart. Pretty typical, a plastic windshield piece and, a plastic interior with a little suspension piece and posts that need to be drilled out. So anyway, birth of the Lincoln Continental, 1939. They produced it till 1948, and then it went on hiatus until like 1956, according to Wikipedia. They produced it until 2002, and then it went on another hiatus until 2017, when they reintroduced the model. This is the 4th generation Lincoln Continental right here. It came in a 2-door hardtop and a 4-door sedan and a 4-door convertible. First 4-door convertible produced since World War II. Initially, you could only get the 4 doors. The 2 doors didn't come out until a little later. And one thing interesting about Ford Motor Company, Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, is that they were all a part of the same tree of life, as it were. You lift up a Lincoln in Lincoln's hood or bonnet, and you're probably going to see a Ford motor under there. Same with the Mercurys. Well, you go over to GM, and Buick had its Buick motors, and Pontiac had its Pontiac motors, and Chevy had its Chevy motors. It wasn't until later that they consolidated. I purposely drilled that hole through. I'm not going to try to mess around with something that's inside of a trunk. And now all I'm trying to do is I just want to grind it down so at least it's flat. I needed a little bit bigger grinding bit. But yeah, I wasn't going to do anything inside the trunk. You can see the window glass has a crack in it. Initially, I was just going to use it and try to get by with it. But then something happened. I decided to order one. The seat was just dirty. Your typical Matchbox fare. And I actually started this a while back, so I'm into the old primordial ooze, and give her a shake for luck. And in fact, we're going to roll it around a little bit because I was running out of stripper in my jar. The chassis was in really good condition. It was, kind of got that dusty white corrosion on it, so I figure I'll take the wheels off and I'll get after it with a brush and see if I can't make that look a little bit better. The wheels, I thought, the tires were actually in pretty good condition. So Lesney made the casting from 1964 until 1970 in the original wheels, and they converted it to super fast. And they painted it according to the Falkensteiner's variation guide. Light blue, medium blue, seafoam, and they call it, he calls it greenish yellow metallic. And they were all metallic except the seafoam. And it wouldn't be a casting, I don't think, that I would ever try to use SpectraFlame directly upon, because if you look, you can see as I clean it here that there's a lot of little staining here and there on the casting, and that would come through the SpectraFlame fairly easily. And, I always polish. It doesn't take that long to do, and it really helps the finish. But yeah, if you look at it there, you can see, there would be quite a bit of work involved in trying to shoot SpectraFlame on that without some type of an intermediary base layer, which is what I'm going to do. That was basically just lacquer thinner. I buy the stuff by the gallon. It's a great cleaner. I use it for everything, my airbrushes. Yeah, you got to keep the cover on it, though, because this stuff evaporates like nobody's business. If I leave that steel pan sit for an hour and a half, it'll be empty. It'll be just full of dried sediment. And I put on, this is Duplicolor Black as a base to the base coat, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. And part of it was, primer fills in imperfections in the casting. So I wound up doing a couple coats of primer. And then what I'm putting on here is Redline Shop base coat, which I really like because the metal flakes are considerably smaller. I love their base coat. It's wonderful base coat. Especially if you're using translucent paints. It just turns out beautifully. So I get done, and I have this, silver thing, which actually looks pretty cool in and of itself. A guy could almost just put some clear coat on that and put the wheels back on it. But this is a restoration, so we're going to take it that step further. I thought that the color was a blue that had a little bit of green in it. So that's what I did. I used SpectraFlame paint. I started with blue and added just SpectraFlame green until I came up with this color. And I like the hue of this particular color. And I don't even know for sure that it's necessarily out of the range, but I'll get to that later. Putting on a wet coat here. I actually, really like this color, and even though I ultimately didn't use it, I may, I may try to recreate it at some point. Then, the chassis was in really good shape. It just needed to be cleaned up a little bit. So, clean it up, I will. Yeah, you know how these chassis, they get this, it's almost like it's a corrosion, but it's of course it's not going to rust. It's the wrong kind of metal for that, but they do corrode. And then, as per normal for me, I'm going to carve a little punt into the bottom of the end of the axle. That'll help me peen over the edges when I'm done. And then I stopped painting axle heads. I like this way so much better. I take my drill and I put the axle in the drill, and that's a wire brush, and I just wire brush it until it's clean. As far down as I can. I do the last little bit that's in the truck by hand. And then I take a kind of a fine grit sanding pad, and I just kind of polish off the end of the axle. I just think it looks a lot more natural. And then these, boil water, do this, do that. You know what? If you're careful with it, you can do this in about 4 seconds, and it's just easier to do. You can't stay in one spot, and can't do it real long, but you'll soften the plastic up enough to straighten it. Now, I wound up ordering a windshield from MK Models, the folks in the Netherlands, and they have really good parts. So if you're looking for Matchbox parts, look them up. I just wanted to clean all this stuff up, and all I use actually to clean this stuff is a homemade airbrush cleaner. It's alcohol and glycerin and a few other things, and glass cleaner, and it does a nice job. So I got these 4 wheels, and you can see they're in really good condition. So as always, I'm just going to pick the best side and put it on my little form and peen it over. You can see the little dimple in the center of it kind of gets smaller and smaller as I flatten it out. One axle, then the other. But anyway, let's pop back and take a look at where I started with this thing again, and you can see the casting is a little bit corroded. And these metallic colors are interesting, and I did some reading, and it seems like Lesney actually didn't mix their own paint, so my theory about Fred the Paint Guy went out the window. They sourced all their paint, and I can't remember where I read it. It was an article, and they were talking about actually about the variances, which is something that I've talked about in other videos. But anyway, let's see where I wound up with this at this point. So, it wasn't even really that I didn't like this color. I thought it was kind of a cool color. I did a little snooping around on the internet, and I actually found an example that's very similar. It's not quite the same color, but it certainly falls within the range. But there were a number of other things about the casting that I wasn't happy with. There were some areas where I encountered some pooling, and I decided I wanted to put a new windshield piece in it and everything. So, and it certainly wasn't anywhere near the color that I started with. So yeah, I made that fateful decision that I've made before to start over from scratch. Some of the things that I didn't like about this was if you look across the middle of the hood, you can kind of see there was a little bit of pooling. I probably didn't lay the paint on. And then again here at the back of the trunk, and then there's a spot up on the roof. So, yep, I'm going to take the doggone thing apart and start over with that part of it at least. And this was the first car that I tried in my new stripper. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to bore you with a repeat of the processes that you just watched. So once I give this thing a little shake for luck, I'm going to show you how it turned out. So there you have it. The Matchbox number 31C. Lincoln Continental. I think it turned out really good, and as my buddy down south would say, I'm happy with that. Be an episode of The Bench following this video. Subscribe if you like. Thumb up, thumb down, don't matter to me. This is just a hobby. Please keep your comments respectful. This is TimeRider, and I'll leave the light on for you. Hey everybody, thanks for hanging around for this episode of The Bench. Well, let's start with a little housekeeping. We've got the Anglia Leap Year Invitational coming up. And if you don't see your name sliding across the screen right about now, you should get a hold of me or Paul or George or somebody and let us know that you want to participate in this build. These Anglias, you can find the doggone things on eBay for like $2, so it's not a very expensive casting. And speaking of Anglias, look at this thing. I started doing some polishing on it, and I got to like an underlayer of what looks to be copper. And in my live feed, somebody said that if there's copper underneath like that, that the casting's probably plated in nickel. And I wanted to polish it. It had like Spectraflame on it originally, but it just looked really cruddy, like they didn't do a very good job of it. And you'll see too, when I do the final video on this, that when I got the paint off, the casting, it was super shiny, but it was really a very dirty casting that had a lot of rough spots and burrs and everything on it. And then anyway, getting off of that, I had been talking about starting a little bit of an eBay store to sell some of the castings that I've done, because I'm getting so many. And as I've said before, I'm really not a collector. I'm a hobbyist. So I wouldn't mind selling some of the stuff that I've done to help me defray some costs around here. Some of it I'll donate to charity. You all know me. And so I bought these little sleeves to put the castings in. I actually have another type too that I can use for some of the larger castings. And then on the last but not least front is this Mercedes-Benz, this Redline Hot Wheels. And I put it on my community page. I was just curious what people thought about that white stripe, because I think it's kind of ugly. But the reason I asked is because I want to do a restoration. And of course, I got the TMI responses of paint it this color, paint it that color, take the wheels off it. No, it's the first Redline restoration that I'm really doing. And I'm going to do it up the way it ought to be done. I just don't like the white stripe. So I may just do a really nice Spectraflame paint job and just not put the stripe on. I have new wheels for it, so I'm good to go. And I guess that's about all I got for everybody today. Hope everybody had a great weekend. And I've got a couple more restorations on the bench and some customs and stuff coming up. So that's about it. This is TimeRider. Everybody have a great week.